There's a version of you that you stopped introducing. Not because it was wrong, not because it was too broken to show, but because at some point, you learned. You learned that not all rooms were safe for all of you. And so something in you made a decision, a quiet one, the kind that doesn't announce itself, to be smaller than you were, less than you were, easier to carry than you were. And then a strange thing happened. You forgot you'd made that choice. And now you walk around feeling slightly off, not dramatically wrong, not broken in any way you could explain to someone, just slightly behind yourself. Like there's a distance between where you are and where you actually live. This video is about that distance and what it actually is. Because I don't think you lost yourself. I think you learned to hide. And that's a very different thing. You know what it feels like from inside. Not the explanation of it, the texture of it. The way you move through a conversation always half a step behind your own words, monitoring. Did that land right? Did I say too much? Did I take up too much room? The way you smile at the right moments. The way, "I'm fine," comes out before you've even checked whether it's true. The thing is, it stopped feeling like a lie around the time you stopped noticing you were saying it. Someone asks what you want, and there's a pause. Longer than you expected. Longer than the question seems to require. Not because you don't have preferences, but because you've spent so long asking what everyone else wanted, reading it, anticipating it, delivering it, that the other question went quiet inside you. The signal is still there. You just stopped receiving it so long ago that you forgot what it sounded like. You're good at people. Everyone says it. You read rooms the moment you enter them. You feel the shift in someone's mood before they've moved a muscle. You know what's needed before it's asked. You've become fluent in everyone around you. And inside, you're standing in a house where you've rearranged everything so many times to accommodate who's visiting that you no longer remember what the original layout was. There's a particular kind of tired you've been carrying. Not the tired that sleep fixes. The tired that comes from performing a version of yourself for so long that you can't remember when the performance started and whether there was something before it. That's not a mood. That's not a bad week. That's what it feels like when you've been away from yourself for a very long time and you've been polite enough about it that nobody noticed, including you. We use the word lost. I lost myself. Like the self is something that slips from a pocket. Like one ordinary morning you reached for it, and it simply wasn't there. But I want to offer you something different. I think the self was never lost. I think it learned to hide. Those are not the same thing. A thing that is lost is somewhere you cannot find it. Scattered. Gone. Out of reach. But a thing that is hidden is still exactly where it was placed. Intact. Waiting. It isn't gone. It just learned that being visible was not safe. There was a psychoanalyst, Winnicott, who spent his life studying something most people never think about. The difference between the self we actually are and the self we learn to present. He said, when the world around us can't hold the fullness of who we are, when it pushes back against us, withdraws from us, punishes us, we build something else. We build a version of ourselves that the world can handle. Not fake, not fraudulent, functional. A self built for survival in the specific terrain of that specific life. And the thing is, it worked. The false self was a success. It kept you safe. It got you loved, or at least tolerated. It reduced the cost. The problem isn't that you built it. The problem is that you forgot you were wearing it. And then the world changed. And the rooms got safer. And people arrived who could have held more of you. But the self kept running the old rules. Because rules formed under pressure don't check whether the pressure is still there. They just run. Think about what you learned. Not in classrooms. Not from anything anyone deliberately taught you. What you learned in the silence after you cried and the room stayed cold. What you learned the first time you said something honest and watched the connection thin. What you learned when your need arrived in your hands and became a burden before it could become a request. Being emotional is unsafe. Honesty causes things to break. Having needs costs more than it gives. Being too much means being left. Being sensitive means being a target. None of those were lessons anyone sat you down to teach. They were conclusions you drew from the data the world gave you. A child doesn't think, this environment is asking too much of me. A child thinks, something about me is wrong. I need to change. And they adapt. Children are not fragile. They are extraordinary at reading what the world requires and becoming exactly that. So you became agreeable because disagreement cost you something you couldn't keep paying. You became useful because usefulness felt like the only reliable currency that guaranteed people would stay. You became quiet because quiet was rewarded with peace and noise was punished with withdrawal. You became easy because the people who needed things, the people who expressed things, the people who asked for things, you watched them lose rooms they wanted to stay in. And you took note. None of that was weakness. It was intelligence. It was the most rational response available to the information you were given. The tragedy isn't that you responded that way. The tragedy is that the response kept running long after the original information expired. Because the rules that form early, formed under pressure, formed without options, formed before you had the language to question them. Those rules don't dissolve when the world softens. They go underground. They keep running silently. They shape the way you enter every room, every relationship, every conversation, as if the original threat is still present, even when it isn't. Even when the person in front of you would actually welcome the real thing. Even when you're somewhere that could finally hold you. Your body still remembers the rooms where being yourself cost you something, and it doesn't always know you've left. Let's talk about what actually disappeared. Not you. Specific things. Specific parts. Your sadness, the kind that had nowhere to land because showing it made someone else uncomfortable, didn't leave. It went quiet. It became a low-level hum beneath everything. The one that's hard to explain. The one that makes you say I feel off and not know what to point at. Your anger, the sharp, clear signal that something crossed a line, got filed away so many times that eventually you stopped knowing where your lines were. Not because you don't have any, because you stopped consulting them. And now when someone crosses one, you feel something vague and uncomfortable that you can't quite name, because you were never allowed to learn what your own anger felt like long enough to recognize it. Your need, the simple human fact of needing things from people, became a burden in your hands before it became a request in your mouth. You swallowed it before it could cost you anything. You called that being low maintenance. It was also being invisible. And your sensitivity, the capacity to feel the texture of moments, to be moved by things other people walk past, to notice what isn't being said. Someone told you that was too much. Not once. Repeatedly. In small ways. And so you performed a version of yourself that felt less. But here is what I need you to understand. Emotions do not stop existing when they stop being expressed. They go underground. And underground things do not die. They accumulate. They press against the surface. They become the numbness you can't shake. The flatness. The sense that you are inside your own life, but somehow not quite present in it. There, but from a slight, persistent distance. Jung called the exiled parts of the self the shadow. Not destroyed. Exiled. The things that didn't fit. The needs, the feelings, the instincts, the expressions that were too much for the environment, and so were sent somewhere dark to wait. The shadow doesn't disappear. It waits. And it becomes the hum beneath everything. The grief that arrives without occasion. The longing for something you cannot name because the thing you're longing for is a version of yourself you didn't finish getting to know. You didn't become empty. You became full of things that had nowhere to go. There's a kind of exhaustion that has nothing to do with being tired. It doesn't respond to sleep. It doesn't go away on vacation. It lingers even in the moments when, on paper, everything is fine. It's the exhaustion of managing, of reading every room before you enter, of adjusting your tone, your volume, your need, pulling yourself in where you're too much, pushing forward where you seem too little. Always slightly behind the actual moment, in the monitoring space, making sure you are still acceptable. This is what psychologists who study neurodivergent experience call masking, the suppression of your natural expression in order to perform the expected version. But the mechanism isn't exclusive. Anyone who learned early that their natural self was a social liability learned some version of this. You observed what was rewarded. You performed the rewarded version. You repeated it until it became habit. And then, the habit became invisible, even to you. The moment it became invisible is the moment the gap closed. Not because the performance became authentic, but because you lost access to what was underneath. The mask didn't just cover you. Eventually, you forgot the shape of your own face under it. And now, when someone says just be yourself, you smile at the invitation and don't know where to start. Not because there's nothing there, because the source material has been buried under so many practiced versions that getting to it feels like digging through years of your own careful construction. Every time you said I'm fine when you weren't, you were practicing. Every time you swallowed the honest response, you were practicing. Every time you made yourself smaller so someone else could be more comfortable, you were practicing. And you got very, very good. You got very good at peace. You protected it. You pruned yourself around it constantly, trimming anything that might disturb it, swallowing anything that might break it, becoming whatever the room needed so that the peace could survive. But here's the thing about that peace. It wasn't stillness. It was the silence that arrives when you have made yourself small enough that nothing can reach you. Not the hurt, but not the rest either. Not the aliveness. Not the feeling of being fully inside your own experience while being in the same room as another person. Not the sense of being known and knowing. You mistook the absence of collision for connection. You mistook the quiet of your own suppression for peace. And somewhere beneath the managing, you already know this. That what you've been calling maturity was sometimes just disappearing more gracefully. Quieter. More convincing. But a disappearance nonetheless. The people who really looked at you, the ones who paid attention, sometimes they almost saw it. The slight delay before your answer. The way your smile arrived a fraction of a second after it should have. The way you answered the question everyone was asking and not the one you were actually being asked. You were performing wellness. Performing okay. Performing someone who had it together. And the terrible efficiency of it was that it worked. People believed it. Which meant you kept being asked to perform it. Which meant the performance deepened. Which meant the space between the performance and the actual person grew quieter and quieter until even you stopped hearing the difference. I want to tell you something. Not comfort. Not a solution. Not a reframe that makes this feel smaller than it is. Something true. The parts of you that went quiet did not leave. They never left. The self that learned to hide is not the self that died. Those are not the same. It went underground. Into the dark. Into the place where unexamined things wait because waiting was the only option left. And things that wait underground, they're not passive. They press. They accumulate. They become the ache you can't locate, the grief that arrives without occasion, the sudden, unexpected longing for a version of your life that felt realer than this one. You are not someone who needs to be built from scratch. You are someone who needs to be uncovered. That is a different project entirely, and a much more specific one, and a much more hopeful one. Because you're not empty. You are full of the self you stopped allowing. Full of feelings that went underground rather than go away. Full of wants that learned to be quiet rather than face the cost of wanting. Full of opinions that got swallowed so many times that swallowing them stopped feeling like a choice. The question isn't where did I go? The question is, when did I stop making it safe enough for myself to be here? The return to yourself is not what you imagine when you imagine it. It is not a single decision, not a revelation, not a moment in a mirror where you finally recognize the person looking back. It is much smaller than that. It is the moment you notice you've adjusted again, made yourself agreeable again, softened the true thing before it could leave your mouth, and instead of doing it automatically, you pause for just a moment. And you ask, was that for me, or was that for the room? It is the moment you feel something, and instead of immediately putting it on trial, am I overreacting? Is this real? Is this proportionate? You let it exist. For a few seconds, without a verdict. It is the moment you say something true, not managed, not softened for landing, not pre-calculated, just true. And you stay in your body after you've said it. These moments don't feel like recovery. They feel like exposure. Because authenticity, when you've been away from it long enough, doesn't feel like freedom at first. It feels like standing somewhere open without the protection you forgot you'd built. The return is not dramatic. It is a series of small, unremarkable moments of choosing not to override yourself. Not to edit yourself before anyone else gets the chance. Not to abandon yourself preemptively, leaving before you can be left. Moment by moment, room by room, choosing to let a little more of the actual thing be present. You've spent a long time becoming very skilled at other people. You know their rhythms. You track their moods before they express them. You've become fluent in everything outside yourself while slowly losing access to the original language. The language of what you want, what you feel, what you would actually say if you stopped calculating the exit cost first. There is no prompt that brings it back all at once. But there is a quiet. A specific kind of quiet you haven't been in for a while. The quiet where you're not monitoring, not adjusting, not reading the room or managing the temperature. Just inside yourself, listening. The way you listen when you've forgotten something and you go still and you wait, because somewhere in the quiet, the thing comes back. The real you is not somewhere you need to sprint toward. It is not a former version you need to excavate from before the hiding started. It is here. It has always been here, waiting, the way underground things wait. Not gone, not destroyed, not even far, just waiting for you to create enough stillness for it to believe that it might finally be safe to come back up. You didn't lose yourself. You learned to hide. And what is hidden can be found.